Never really done this sort of content over here, but I wanted somewhere I could talk in length. So I'm just gonna yap about the playoffs for a little bit. First off, we have the Chargers heading to Houston against a Texans team that has really been on a downward trend the back half of 2024. The offensive line has been bad, Slowick has regressed, along with him has CJ. Nico is the lone survivor in what was supposed to be a very good receiver room, and Joe Mixon, in most part, has put this team on his back. With the offense struggling, they're going to have to lean on the defense, but when you look at that side of the ball, the last quarter of the season, this run defense has really struggled in situational football. They have the second worst success rate against the run in all of football during that time. Texans fans will probably make the argument that they didn't have Azeez, but even when Azeez was healthy prior to his suspension, their run defense was still lackluster for those 4 games. Facing a Chargers team that may not have the best rushing offense in the league, but sure does commit to it, this could pose a huge problem because when you look at the Chargers, they are a rushing offense that struggles through the first 3 quarters. I think they're middle of the pack at best. But once you get to that 4th quarter, they jump all the way up to top 5 as one of the most efficient rushing attacks in football. J.K. Dobbins himself is averaging over 5 yards per carry in the 4th quarter this year, and with him returning to the lineup in the last 2 weeks, this team can get back to what they're good at, which is why I see them doing what they've done all year, controlling the ground game and allowing Herbert to capitalize off of it, marching through Houston in what should be a relatively easy game for them. Next up, over in Pittsburgh, got the Ravens against the Steelers. Now, God forbid after today, if the Ravens lose this football game, we are going to see the nastiest Lamar agendas probably up to this point. The Ravens are the better team. They should blow them out of the water. But when you look at an AFC North showdown, you just have to imagine this game somehow making its way to 17-17 heading into the 4th quarter, despite the Steelers having no business even being in contention. At the end of the day, you take the chalk pick. This is a rushing attack that should prevail when all else isn't there, with Lamar and Derrick Henry leading the way. Zay being out and the Ravens secondary not really being battle tested up to this point, in exception to the last 4 games against bottom half of the league teams, makes me think twice, but Russ and this offense have just been beyond bad. I'm not gonna lie, I am really flipped on these games. I think the Steelers are gonna put up a much better fight than this Broncos team will. And it has nothing to do with the talent that either team possesses, but merely Josh Allen and this Bills offense put up so many points no matter who's in front of them, in exception to the Ravens game obviously, that it is going to be very difficult for a Broncos offense to just flip the switch from this team that has kept the pace of the game in their hands into dropping Bo Nix back with him being forced to drive the ball downfield and expect to have success. Can they do it? Sure. Down the stretch, we have seen them be more explosive. The usage of Marvin Mims has exploded. Courtland Sutton is always a threat. But once again, it needs to be taken into account that the Broncos were in control of most of these games. Being down by 2 scores with a rookie at the helm puts a different kind of pressure on a team, and it's why I think this Bills team wins this game by double digits. For the first matchup in the NFC, we have the Rams in Arizona due to the fires playing the Vikings. Now, if you've heard me talk about the Rams on occasion at all before, you'll know that I love this team. I think Sean McVay is one of the best offensive minds in football, as I'm sure most people do. I had this team going to the NFC Championship and winning it last year, but this year I just can't find myself doing it. The pass defense is just so much worse. They created Aaron Donald in the aggregate, but they have not been able to shut down any pass game really at all this year. Another huge reason I thought they could make a run last year is because of the level of play Matthew Stafford was producing. What Matthew Stafford was doing last year was MVP caliber football and really would have been in the conversation had he not missed games. This year, I don't think we've seen that. Cooper Kupp has regressed as well. I know Sam Darnold shit his pants last week. He played a terrible game, probably his worst all year. But I really can't see him going out and putting up the same performance with, let's be real, less pressure on him, because that Lions game they had been looking forward to for the last half of the season. The Vikings are one of the most well-coached teams in the league. Brian Flores is going to have a game plan that at least mitigates Puka. While I would like to see this Rams team make another run, I just think the Vikings have too much firepower, and with the likely coach of the year at the helm of it, I don't think they'll be able to beat him a second time and pull off the upset, although once again, I love to see it. In the 4-5 game, the Commanders travel to Tampa in what is probably the most interesting game in terms of it should be close all week. I don't think anyone realistically can tell you they're definite about anything happening in this game. These two played in week 1 in a matchup that Tampa was in control of pretty much the entire game, but this is not the same Washington team. They have taken strides since then, which is why I think what was the first start of Jaden Daniels' career can't be taken into account when analyzing the outcome of this game. Since that time, Cliff Kingsbury has grown, Jaden Daniels has grown, Brian Robinson and this run game have gotten better. The only thing that hasn't changed is this Washington defense is still a major liability. Defensively, this entire season, they have made no progress, being bottom third of the league the entire time. Against a Buccaneers offense with veteran leadership that can put up points and put them up in bunches, I see this coming back to bite Washington. Bucky Irving has just been fantastic down the stretch behind this offensive line, and you can guarantee that against the 27th worst defense in terms of EPA per play against the run, he is going to have a field day. This game should have a lot of points. It's going to be explosive, but at the end of the day, I just think the Bucs are a lot more balanced team than Washington. As for the last game in the NFC, it is a very interesting matchup with the Packers against the Eagles. Now, I have said for weeks now, if the Eagles run this offense through Jalen Hurts and do not force feed Saquon Barkley, they are the best team in football. Since coming off bye, this has been by far the best defense in football. There has been no one close to them. The only part that has been dragging behind, like I said, is when they don't let Jalen get reps. I'm not sitting here saying you have to drop back Jalen Hurts 40 times a game, but when you sit here and hand the ball off, Jalen Hurts gets out of rhythm. That is just a proven fact at this point in time. His decision making during the stretch of games in which he was throwing the ball less than 25 times was abysmal. Against the Ravens, a game they looked fantastic and Jalen did not. And although that is a team that they beat and is a contender, when the playoffs come around, it's not going to be that easy. No matter how good your rushing attack is, teams are going to commit to it when they know that if they can shut down the rushing attack and have a cold Jalen Hurts drop back, he's not going to see the field clearly and it's going to result in poor play. This team needs Jalen Hurts playing his best football to win a ring. I think Kellen Moore has learned his lesson. They're going to continue to operate this offense as they did against Pittsburgh and take advantage of a Packers team that lost one of their most valuable players just last week in Christian Watson to a torn ACL. No matter what you think of him, when Christian Watson is on the field for this Packers offense, they are a much more explosive team. Sure though, Jordan Love catching lightning in a bottle like he did last year should scare any defense in football. But with this being the best, I still feel relatively confident in the Eagles to get through unscathed. For the first game in the divisional round, we get what is, in my opinion, the most interesting game of these playoffs. The third iteration of Chiefs-Chargers. Both of these games so far this year have come down to the wire, with the Mahomes devil magic, you may say, ending the second game. Now, the end of this is going to be unpopular, but I think the Chargers are one of the most well-balanced teams in football. This defense, sure, has been a little inconsistent, but they're the lowest scoring defense in the league. They're top 5 in EPA almost the entire year. And to be completely honest, I don't know if I trust this Chiefs defense this year the same way as I did last year. This is a Chiefs pass defense that headed into the playoffs last year as not just a top 10 unit, but the third best in football. Steve Spagnuolo had this defense giving up just over 16 points per game throughout last postseason. That is just something I don't trust this team to repeat. The beating a team 3 times in 1 year thing I don't really care about. I know some people will sit here and say, oh, they beat them twice, they're not going to beat them a third time. But realistically, that's just a gambler's fallacy. I straight up think the Chargers are a better football team, and I know that sounds crazy, but if Mahomes wasn't on the opposite sideline, this game would be a much easier pick than it was for me, because I've gone back and forth on this game all week. You never want to go against Mahomes because he always comes back to bite you. And no matter how bad Mahomes has looked in this regular season, he's going to show up. When you look at what this defense is going to have to do, in a 2-point win in Arrowhead, Gus Edwards was in the backfield. I truly believe that if J.K. Dobbins was back there, the Chargers probably win this football game. Gus Edwards ran for 3.6 yards per carry in that game. He was extremely inefficient. And once again, while the Chiefs' run defense is fantastic, the Chargers being able to go out there and have Justin Herbert as their get-out-of-jail-free card against an average pass defense is going to be very difficult for Kansas City to deal with. Now, I am by no means, once again, saying this is going to be an easy win for either team. Probably sits between 5 points. But The Chargers are good enough to win this football game, and so are the Chiefs, but sitting here and pretending that this team is invincible just because of past teams is really putting this team on a pedestal that it hasn't looked like just because of their record. It's Mahomes, though. This is probably going to make me look like an idiot, and they're going to win a ring. In the other AFC matchup, we get Josh versus Lamar. Now, no matter who wins this football game, the narratives that come out of it are going to be the most shameless things we've ever encountered. I love both of these quarterbacks. I am not looking forward to this game. The weak point this entire season people have talked about for the Ravens is this secondary. Around week 10, that turned around. But I honestly can't sit here and say I'm fully confident in them because you look at down the home stretch, they played some of the worst passing offenses in football. So when you take that microcosm from week 10 to week 18, it's going to look good because the difference between 10 through 14 and 15 through 18 are so vast that it balances out. And once again, against the best offense in football, this could pose a problem. But then you just have to take into account what happened in their first matchup. The Bills scored their lowest point total all year. The Ravens' run game just had their way, and although they got Matt Milano back, how big of a difference is that really going to make? Sure, he was their best defensive player before he got hurt, but how much can a 30-year-old linebacker really give you coming off a major injury? For both parties, I just hope this game is close, but I see Lamar and Derrick Henry having their way again with this Bills defense. And although I think Josh Allen and this offense come out stronger, the Ravens are too much and they advance to the NFC Championship. In the NFC, we get another one of those third time's a charm scenario with the Vikings against the Lions. Now, if Sam Darnold had gone out and played even decent football in Week 18, I would have the Vikings winning this football game. I think the Vikings had a multitude of opportunities to go out and win that game. 31-9 is not the score that we watched. Sam Darnold missing Addison for a walk-in touchdown, missing JJ on a route where he had his defender beat by 5 yards on the goal line. Watching him throw this game in real time has made me completely lose confidence that down the stretch in the playoffs he will come through. The Vikings defense can do a good enough job to hold this Lions offense in check, but when your most important player physically cannot put the ball in the end zone against this team in particular, you're not going to win. For the sake of a good game, I hope Sam Darnold is able to battle his demons and come out the other side, but I cannot put faith in this team no matter how good the defense is with the showing he just put on. The other game in the NFC, the Buccaneers versus the Eagles. Now, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I think the Eagles are a much better football team. The Buccaneers obviously won earlier in the year, but during that time, the Eagles were a bottom 5 defense in all of football. Since then, they have been the number 1. This team can go talent for talent with every team in football, and I just don't think the Bucs have the firepower to compete with it. In the AFC Championship game, we get a rematch of a game earlier in the year in which the Chargers came out strong, but the Ravens really took control of the game from the second quarter on, going up by 2 scores late in the fourth. While I don't think the Chargers offense will completely fall apart like they did in that game, I think this game still goes to the Ravens. The Chargers are a fantastic football team, but at this point in time with their weapons, I still think they're a year away. The Chargers are a fantastic football team, but going on the road 3 weeks in a row, specifically to KC and Baltimore, is a difficult task, damn near impossible for any team. And once again, with the ground game that Derrick Henry and Lamar provide, the Ravens are able to play the Chargers brand of football at a better rate. In the NFC, I think this Lions defense that has been overperforming due to Aaron Glenn finally comes back down to earth a little against the Eagles offense that has been electric. The Lions defense since week 10 has been bottom third of the league, and although people will point to Anzalone being out, I'm not going to sit here and take a 1-game sample size of him being back in a game the Vikings easily could have put up points in to say he was the sole reason they weren't performing. The Lions offense is ridiculous, and it's good enough to keep up with every other offense in football. But when there is such a talent discrepancy on one side of the ball for both teams, it just becomes apparent that one is better. In this case, I think that's the Eagles defense and the reason they move on, bringing us to a Ravens-Eagles Super Bowl. Now, the Eagles are the more talented team here, simply based off defense alone. The one thing, though, that seems to always stand out in big games is quarterback play, and Lamar Jackson is far and away the better quarterback in this matchup. If the Eagles are going to even get to this moment, it's going to be through Jalen Hurts. I've said it since the beginning. The last time we saw Jalen Hurts get on a heater and lead them this far, he went toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes, and it's for this reason that if he gets hot again, I think he can do the same. Fair warning, I've always been bad at these, so I mean, might have 3 championship teams out in the wild card weekend. That's cool.